Last June, LSU and Wake Forest played one of the most epic games in College World Series history. Unfortunately, both teams have had a bit of a slow start to conference play this season, which has caused them to drop in the rankings. They're both still in the top 25, which you'll see soon enough, but they're probably one more bad weekend away from being unranked. Hi everyone, I'm Wheels, back with another weekly breakdown of the D1 Baseball Top 25. The background video for this week is Game 3 of Virginia against Duke. I'll be honest, I got a little backed up with videos this weekend with it being Easter. Ideally, this game would have had its own video, and I could have posted other teams like Texas A&M, Kentucky, some Big 12 games, and some softball. We have another big week of games coming up though, which is another opportunity to cover more games. Entering the rankings at 25 is UCF, who is the only Big 12 team currently in the top 25. One spot ahead of them is Nebraska, who is the only Big 10 team that's ranked. Mississippi State drops 2 spots after losing a series in Gainesville. They held a lead entering the 9th inning in all 3 games, but that Florida team is tough to close out wins against, at least in weekend games. I'm a little surprised that South Carolina dropped 4 spots this week. They lost 2 of 3 against Alabama on the road in a ranked matchup where all 3 games were either tied or had the Gamecocks leading entering the 8th inning. Wake Forest plummets all the way down to 21 after getting swept at home by North Carolina. I'm honestly really surprised by Wake this year. We're basically at the midpoint of the regular season already, and they are towards the bottom of the ACC standings. The talent is there for them to turn things around, but you gotta be able to win ball games. Before getting to the top 20, I'll mention that both Kansas State and Oklahoma dropped out of the rankings after losing their weekend series. Coastal Carolina drops 1 spot to 20 despite winning a road series. NC State swept Notre Dame, which pushes them into the top 20. They host East Carolina, who you'll hear about in a little while, in a midweek game on Tuesday. LSU drops 10 spots to number 18 after getting swept by Arkansas. Honestly, even though they got swept, this was probably the best they've looked in a conference series all season. They had a shot to win all 3 games on the road against number 1, but just couldn't get that big hit. The pitching did look a lot better though. With that said, at 2-7 in SEC games, moral victories aren't enough. You gotta start winning games. I don't make these rankings, but I think I can pretty confidently say that if LSU loses their home series against Vandy this weekend, they'll be out of the top 25. At that point, they'd be either 2-10 or 3-9 in conference games, which is not worthy of a top 25 spot. Ahead of the Tigers is the team they faced in last year's Super Regionals, Kentucky. They're 24-4, which includes an 8-1 record in conference games. I feel really bad that I still haven't made any videos for this team yet in 2024. That's changing this week though. They host Louisville in a midweek and then Alabama over the weekend, so get ready to finally see some Kentucky videos on the channel this season. UC Irvine enters the all-important top 16 after a perfect 4-0 week, which included a sweep of Hawaii on the road. Virginia drops 6 spots to 15, which really surprises me. I know they lost their series, but they were on the road against number 11, and all 3 games were relatively close. They'll have a chance to move back up this weekend though, as they'll host North Carolina, who you'll soon see enter the top 10. Florida State picked up another midweek win over the Gators and followed it up with a series win over Louisville, which moves them up to number 14. Once again, 1 spot ahead of Florida State is Alabama, who won a ranked series against South Carolina. It doesn't matter the sport, Bama will always be 1 spot ahead of the Seminoles, I guess. At 12 is East Carolina, who went 4-0 last week. Like I said before, they face NC State on Tuesday in a great midweek matchup. Virginia Tech improved to 10-2 in conference games last weekend after winning 2 of 3 against Pittsburgh, which moves them up to number 11. Like Kentucky, this is another team that I still haven't covered this year, but that's going to change this week. They host Wake Forest this weekend and will have a chance to knock the Deacons out of the top 25. As always, before going over the top 10, it's time to talk predictions. Pretty solid last week as I went 7-4, which brings my season record to 18-11. Correct predictions are in green, incorrect ones in red. For this week, I have Arkansas over Ole Miss, North Carolina over Virginia, LSU over Vandy in a close series, Clemson over Notre Dame, Duke over Miami, Kentucky over Alabama, South Carolina over Texas A&M, Auburn with an upset over Tennessee, Florida over Missouri, but weekend wins are no surprise for them, so I'll also pick the Gators to win their midweek over Florida A&M. I also have Virginia Tech over Wake Forest, Nebraska over Ohio State, Oklahoma State over Oklahoma, and Oregon State over Arizona State. 13 predictions this week since there's a lot of big series. Okay, now the top 10. North Carolina moves up to number 10 after sweeping a road series over Wake Forest. I actually think the Tar Heels are a little underranked right now. With a 10-2 conference record and an RPI of 4, in my opinion, this is a top 5 team in the country. They'll head to Virginia next weekend on a 9-game winning streak. Duke moves up to number 9 after an impressive series win over Virginia. They needed a bounce-back weekend after losing 2 consecutive conference series, and they'll host a tough Miami team next weekend with a chance to move above 500 in conference play. Dallas Baptist had a perfect 4-0 week, which moves them up to number 8. They're now 5-1 in conference play to go along with an overall record of 23-4. Vandy stays at 7 after going 4-0 last week. The pitching was the story, as they gave up just 4 runs across those 4 games. However, the offense had another quiet week, as they scored only 13 runs across those 4 wins. Getting the wins is all that matters, and I know they've had a lot of injuries, but I'd like to see some bigger numbers on the scoreboard for them. They head to Baton Rouge looking to pick up their first true road wins of the season. I do think they'll accomplish that, but I have a feeling this might be the weekend that LSU finally bounces back and gets their first conference series win of the season. We'll see though. I expect all 3 games to be close. Everybody's favorite team to talk about, the Florida Gators, stay at 6 after their obligatory 2-2 week that included a midweek loss and a ranked weekend series win. Nothing has really changed for me about this team since last week when I spent over a minute talking about them, so I'll keep it shorter this week. Something's got to give at this point. Either they'll start winning the midweeks or they'll drop a weekend series. Having your ace start on Sundays makes it very difficult for opposing teams to win series against you, though. Oregon State drops to 5 after getting swept by USC. It was just a 2-game series after Game 3 got canceled due to weather, but this was still a bit of a surprise. They stay in the top 5 for now, but with the Pac-12 not being too strong this year, one more series loss could really hurt their standing in the rankings. Tennessee looked as if they were going to let Georgia come in and steal a series, which surely would have propelled them into the rankings, but the Vols erased a 4-run deficit in Game 2 and shut out a tough Bulldogs lineup in Game 3 to overcome that Friday night run rule loss and win the series. They go on the road next weekend to face an Auburn team that's much better than their 1-8 conference record suggests, which leads me to believe that, like LSU, they're due for a series win. Texas A&M just swept that Auburn team, which included a couple of really close wins. And I've already seen the comments. I know I didn't get to post highlights for any of those games, but I don't hate Texas A&M. They just happened to walk off Game 3 around 1 a.m. the night before Easter when I had Mass to be up for in the morning. I'll try to get that video up at some point during the week depending on how things go. Moving into the number 2 spot is Clemson. They split a couple of 3-2 games with Miami before shutting them out in the rubber match, which puts their conference record at 7-2 through 3 series. Arkansas stays in the top spot once again after an extremely impressive 3-game sweep over LSU. They continue to get it done with great pitching and timely hitting. They aren't lighting up the scoreboard, but they know how to win games, which is what you need to do. And with that, we have another week of college baseball rankings. Before wrapping up the video, though, I do have to bring up how my Yankees just swept a 4-game series against the Astros in Houston. We have to get Soto locked up long-term as soon as possible. He's a franchise-changing player that can get us to finally win number 28. Alright, that's all for this video. I hope you all have a great week and enjoy some more coverage of college baseball.
Ground ball to third. Miller across the diamond, and Duke takes 2 out of 3.